Turning now to President Trump's trade war. As U.S. and Chinese officials meet in Switzerland this weekend, President Trump has suggested he may be open to lowering tariffs on China. However, the White House remains cautious and is downplaying expectations. The president still holds his position that he will not unilaterally reduce tariffs on China. Regarding the 80% figure, that was a number the president mentioned, and we will see what happens this weekend. No, not at all. Because we have already made a great deal. We are not doing business with China right now. This trade conflict was supposed to end years ago. Tariffs and trade battles between two of the world's biggest economies locked in a fight no one could afford. But here we are. It is 2025, and it's back with a vengeance. Trump is back in the White House, and so are the tariffs, not just a few percentage points, but 145% duties on key Chinese goods like steel, solar panels, EV parts, and batteries. If it comes from China, it is being hit hard. China did not back down and retaliated with 125% tariffs on American imports such as soybeans, machinery, and microchips. This is a full economic firefight. While politicians argue over strategy, billions of dollars in goods still need to move. American buyers still want cheap parts, and Chinese factories still want U.S. customers. But the front door is locked. So now exporters are using the side door. What happens next is a trick that has quietly exploded across Asia and is already flooding U.S. ports. It is called place of origin washing, the biggest open secret in global trade. Here's how it works. A Chinese factory makes electric bike motors. With the new U.S. tariffs, shipping those motors straight to Los Angeles would cost 145% more, a death sentence for pricing. Instead, the factory boxes the motors and ships them to Malaysia. Once there, the motors undergo light processing. Maybe they are unboxed, a small wire is swapped, or a barcode is added, just enough to make them look different. Then they receive a brand new certificate of origin. Now, the motor is not made in China, it is made in Malaysia. That one document transforms it from a tariff bomb into a tariff-free product. And just like that, the same Chinese motor enters the U.S. legally, with no 145% tax, no red flags, just business as usual. This place of origin washing is not a fringe trick. It is growing fast, quietly and systematically. Export agents advertise it on WeChat. Middlemen build entire supply chains around it. And Southeast Asia has become the new middle stop for Chinese goods headed to America. What makes this possible are loopholes. As U.S. Customs often lacks the manpower or technology to trace a product's true journey. As long as the paperwork looks clean, the container moves without questions. But now the numbers are exploding, and Washington is starting to ask how much of what arrives from Southeast Asia is actually just China in disguise. Looking at trade data from the last 12 months, imports from Malaysia, Vietnam, and Cambodia are skyrocketing, not just a little, but double-digit surges month after month in electric bikes, solar panels, steel parts, and even clothing. Here's the twist. These countries are not building massive new factories or flooding the market with new products. Instead, they are moving Chinese goods under their own names. Here's how it works. A Chinese company ships goods to a partner in, say, Penang, Malaysia. A local firm receives the goods, does minimal or no processing, then re-exports them with new documentation. Boom, the product says made in Malaysia. Same product, new identity. Vietnam has become a hotspot too, especially in electronics. Cambodia has quietly entered the textile and garment sector. They are not building supply chains from scratch. They are just renting out their names. It is fast, cheap, and for now, it works. However, these countries are starting to feel pressure. Malaysia's government recently tightened its certificate of origin rules. Vietnam's customs agency has flagged 30 companies under investigation. Cambodia's trade officials have publicly warned exporters to stay compliant. Here's the danger. They don't want to get caught in the middle. If the U.S. decides they are turning a blind eye, these countries could lose access to the American market entirely, a risk no small economy wants to take. But as long as U.S. tariffs remain high and Chinese exporters remain eager, these routes will continue to grow. In global trade, money always finds a way. This is not a one-off trick. Over the past year, a full parallel industry has emerged focused on navigating trade restrictions legally or through gray areas. And a lot of it starts with demand. American buyers still want affordable solar panels, EV batteries, and electronics. Chinese manufacturers still want to sell. But with tariffs now up to 145%, the pressure on both sides has created something new, a middle industry focused on getting goods through, just without direct China labeling. This system relies on logistics networks, re-export hubs, paperwork intermediaries. It is not necessarily illegal. In many cases, it falls into a gray zone where the product might legally pass through another country, get lightly processed, and leave with a new certificate of origin. Companies offering these services are multiplying quickly. They advertise in Mandarin on social platforms and business forums, offering country of origin conversion, rapid re-exporting through Southeast Asia, set up for third-country logistics, and compliance support. For many, this is not seen as deception but as adapting to the rules because the global trade landscape has changed. Supply chains are longer, more complex, and more strategic than ever before. As long as tariffs remain high and demand strong, these workarounds will continue to grow, regardless of where the goods come from or where they are headed. Governments may tighten enforcement, but the reality is clear: businesses on all sides are adjusting. It's not about good or bad. It's about survival in a new era of trade. Washington knows what is happening and is now pushing back. In early 2025, U.S. Customs and Border Protection launched a major crackdown targeting suspected rerouting schemes, more inspections, more detentions at ports, and for the first time, deep audits on shipments labeled made in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. It is no longer random container checks. Now U.S. officials use AI systems to trace origin inconsistencies, flagging goods that leave China, appear briefly in Southeast Asia, then arrive at U.S. ports with a new identity. Customs officers have been instructed, don't just check what it says on the box, check where it really came from. The numbers show this shift. In just 3 months, detentions of suspect shipments increased by 38%. Several importers now face investigations. Some are already in court accused of knowingly participating in transshipment schemes to avoid tariffs. At the same time, the U.S. is pressuring Southeast Asian governments behind the scenes through diplomatic cables, trade meetings, and quiet warnings. The message: if this continues, the U.S. will start treating your exports like they're Chinese. This could mean tariffs extended to partner countries, even if they were not the original target. The challenge is that while enforcement is increasing, trade networks are evolving just as fast. For every container flagged, dozens get through. For every crackdown, there's a new route. In a world driven by speed, cost, and demand, even customs struggle to keep up. This has become a high-stakes cat-and-mouse game, one side tightening rules, the other adapting in real time. Right now, no one is clearly winning. Southeast Asia did not ask for this spotlight. Countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia now find themselves in the middle of a trade war they did not start and cannot control. On one hand, the surge in exports looks like a win. Foreign investment is rising, factories are busy, ports are moving record volumes. For developing economies, that is significant. Jobs are created, industrial zones expand, and new global buyers are eager to find alternatives to China. On the other hand, it carries risks. When Chinese goods pass through these countries just to get a new label, their trade reputation is at risk. If the U.S. believes they are turning a blind eye, it could mean tariffs on their own exports, strained trade relationships, or losing special trade privileges like duty-free access. Governments in the region are starting to feel the pressure. Malaysia has launched new investigations into exporters. Vietnam is reviewing re-export data and quietly warning logistics companies to be cautious. Even Cambodia, where regulations are looser, is now involved in high-level talks with U.S. officials. The truth is most of these countries do not want to be seen as part of a loophole. But in fast-moving global trade, it is not always easy to draw a clear line. Some businesses operate within the rules, others push the edge, and in between is a murky space where intentions are hard to prove and enforcement even harder. For Southeast Asia, the challenge is clear: how to grow the economy, attract foreign business, and stay on the right side of U.S. trade law all at once. It is a delicate balance, and one wrong step could cost billions. Here is the twist most people don't talk about. While the U.S. government cracks down on imports, many U.S. companies quietly benefit from the very loopholes officials are trying to close. How? Because rerouted goods still mean lower prices. For example, if you are a U.S. solar panel distributor who used to import directly from China, that now comes with a 145% tariff, not sustainable. But if that same panel shows up labeled made in Malaysia, there is no tariff or penalty, same factory, same product, different route. For you, it's business as usual, just with one extra stop along the way. Solar retailers are still buying Chinese-made apparel. EV companies still need Chinese battery parts. Construction firms still rely on Chinese metals. These firms don't always ask too many questions. They follow the paperwork, and as long as the certificate of origin looks clean, they proceed. In some cases, they even work directly with middlemen who specialize in rerouting goods. It's not illegal unless they knowingly participate in fraud, but the lines are blurry because in today's supply chain, most buyers don't know where every bolt or chip really comes from. They trust suppliers, they trust documentation, and as long as prices stay low and goods keep flowing, the system keeps running. So, while politicians call for stronger enforcement and tougher rules, many American businesses are quietly profiting from the very workarounds those policies are trying to stop. It's one of the biggest contradictions in today's global trade game. Public pressure to decouple but private incentives to keep everything connected. And as long as that gap exists, these trade routes won't stop. Sometimes the clearest evidence isn't in leaked memos or secret deals, it's in the data. Let's look at trade numbers from the past 12 months. U.S. imports from China are down sharply, especially in sensitive sectors like solar tech, EV parts, and steel. But imports from Southeast Asia are up dramatically. Malaysia's electronics shipments to the U.S. jumped by over 40% year-over-year. Vietnam's machinery and electrical components rose more than 30%, and Cambodia's textiles and apparel spiked, with some categories doubling in value. Now ask yourself, are those countries suddenly manufacturing 10 times more? Not likely. Industry analysts call it what it is: displacement. Chinese goods that used to go direct are now flowing through Southeast Asia. The labels changed, but the volume didn't. In fact, some Chinese ports are still shipping at similar levels, but their destination labels are changing. A container might still leave Shenzhen but is now routed to Penang, then Long Beach. This isn't speculation. It's visible in customs records, port throughput data, and international trade reports. Even logistics companies are reporting a surge in multi-leg routing requests, shippers asking for custom routes that break up the journey to mask the original source. Behind the scenes, financial analysts are watching too. Investment banks have flagged the mismatch between Chinese output and direct U.S. imports, adjusting forecasts because even though tariffs are technically in place, the goods are still getting in. The story the numbers tell: global trade hasn't stopped. It's just rerouted. Tariffs change the shape of the river, but the water, the flow of goods and money, still moves. In today's economy, tracking that flow is one of the clearest ways to see what's really happening. As trade routes get more complex, enforcement agencies are turning to something new: technology. Today, origin fraud isn't just caught by checking paperwork, it's tracked by data systems, AI, and digital trade networks. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has been upgrading its tools. They now use machine learning to scan shipping records, flag unusual route patterns, and compare them against known production capacity in each country. For example, if Malaysia suddenly exports 10 times more solar panels than it manufactures, that's a red flag, not proof, but a clue. These systems connect customs filings, satellite shipping data, factory-level production estimates, and import-export ratios between neighboring countries. It's like building a map of the global supply chain in real time. And it's not just governments. Private trade intelligence firms are also playing a bigger role. Companies that ship large volumes now rely on digital dashboards to check supplier reliability and trace product origins. Some use blockchain tracking. Others rely on software that audits trade flows using customs data. The goal is transparency, not blame. The idea isn't to accuse, but to understand what's moving, how, and why. Because in an era where goods can pass through multiple countries, the old methods, checking the label, stamping the form, just aren't enough. Technology doesn't solve everything, but it helps level the playing field so rules are applied fairly and real origin can be verified without guesswork. It also means exporters and importers need to be more aware. In today's system, what you ship and where it appears to come from can now be tracked down to the smallest detail, and that's changing how global trade works, not by shutting it down, but by asking better questions about how it's built. Here's where things get complicated. Not every rerouted shipment is illegal. In fact, much of what's happening sits in a space trade experts call the legal gray zone. International trade law is complex, built on decades of treaties, regional agreements, and national rules. And when products cross borders, especially through multiple countries, the legal definition of origin can get murky. Under World Trade Organization, WTO, guidelines, the country of origin isn't just where a product is,